Evening and welcome to the first season edition of the Football League Weekly with Rhys and I. First of all, apologies if there are tech issues. As you can hear, there are tech issues already. Wait a minute, I know what that is. Okay, let's see whether that is still happening. I don't. Okay, there you go. Tech issues on my end. We'll start again. We'll start a new one. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Football League Weekly, the first edition of the season. We have plenty of things to talk about this season, including a season preview, which we are going to start off with, and as always, our previews and reviews. This show will also be up on iTunes, Spotify, and other streaming services as well. And this year we are joined by Rhys Curtis, who is the new co-host of the show. First of all, Rhys, how are you and how are you feeling ahead of this season?
Oh, I'm really good, thanks, mate. Really good. And I think I speak for all sort of town fans when I say optimistic. We're living in an age where, for our generation, we haven't seen this before. We haven't had a reason to be positive. We've not had a reason to celebrate. And now to be in a championship where it feels like the sky is the limit is simply fantastic.
So, again, we're both Ipswich Town fans, as you can see. As a Town fan coming into League One, do you realise how difficult the Championship is? Because in my opinion, the Championship this season, and we'll talk about it more in our preview, is probably the toughest it's been in years.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's for sure. There's no doubt about it. But it felt like every year during those horrible decade and a half we were saying that every season as well. But especially this season, when you look at the teams who came down, you've got Leeds, Southampton, and Leicester. Either of those, if they get the recruitment right over the next 2 to 3 weeks, can easily win this league. And then you've got the likes of Coventry, you've got Sunderland, you've got Middlesbrough, you've got Millwall. These are all teams that are going to be pushing for that top six. And you see Town fans, especially on Twitter, who are saying, oh yeah, we'll make top six, we'll win this league. If I'm honest with you, and of course we'll go into it later, but if I'm honest with you, I'll take 10th. I'll bite your hand off for 10th right now.
And let's also quickly, because again, we will discuss this in more detail later on in the show, let's talk about the bottom half of the table as well, because many people are predicting the likes of QPR, Rotherham and Huddersfield to go down. Do you reckon it'll be tight towards the bottom end of the table?
Oh, it always is. And those three teams you mentioned there, my three teams I've got to go down. It always is tight, but I think we'll agree on who's going to finish rock bottom. Spoiler alert, QPR. Apart from those, it's going to be very, very tight. The Championship, if you ignore the Premier League, the Championship is the most competitive league in Europe. Anyone can and is capable of being anyone on their day. It's a tough league to predict.
And I'd agree with that. And if you are joining us live on Twitch or on YouTube or even on Twitter, then get in on the conversation. Let us know who you think is going to go up and who is going to go down from both the Championship, League One and League Two. And I think there's no better way to start than to get into our preview. So this week, the format will be a little bit different. We'll be doing the season preview first, and then we'll get into a quick review of the last match day and then the preview as well. So first of all, before we talk about our favourites for promotion and relegation, the Championship this season, there are a lot of teams coming down with a lot of parachute payments, the likes of Leeds, Leicester and Southampton. Do you reckon that the league is going to be as competitive higher up?
It always is. Always is. I think, don't quite me, I think it was Southampton who rejected a bid of 46 million for one of their midfielders. And you look at that and you think, if they're in a position to be able to reject 46 million, then these parachute payments are going to be ridiculous. It's going to be so competitive at the top of this league.
Which is absolutely ridiculous as well, because James Ward-Prowse, if he was in the Premier League, do you reckon he'd be worth that much?
Well, Warhead, maybe an unpopular opinion, but James Ward-Prowse, if you take away his free kick ability, take away his penalty and set piece ability, he's just an average your average Premier League centre mid. I don't see the draw of him. Although talking about him, I think he just had a confirmed deal to West Ham.
Which for Southampton will be brilliant because, they'll have the money should they go up next season to actually push on. But when you look at a lot of these teams and a lot of, especially Leeds, who've actually let go of probably half their squad from last season, and they're actually getting a lot of money for their players. So do you reckon the transfer money could ultimately dictate the next transfer window?
I think it can, but we saw when we got when we brought in Paul Hurst, where we brought in a load of signs as well, and it always takes that time. So despite saying that Leeds are going to be up there, there's no doubt they're going to be. It's going to be a gelling process. It's going to take time, and the Championship you don't get that time. If it takes you 10 games to get started, you can fall back, and it's hard to make up those 10 games.
And here is a list of some of the team or some of the players that the bigger teams brought in. Southampton, they've actually spent quite a bit on loans, actually. Derek Abu is joining from Chelsea. Ryan Manning on a free from Swansea. Zach Orr from Arsenal and Joe Lumley as well. Actually, reading through the list, they've only spent money on one player, and that is Shea Charles from Manchester City. We can't just talk about the top side of the table, as there are other teams who spent plenty as well. Plymouth, they've surprised me because I wasn't expecting them to bring in so many players. They've signed Ballymumba on Norwich. That was an undisclosed fee. Morgan Whitaker from Swansea under another undisclosed fee. Joel, and I can't pronounce the name, and I won't even try to. Giulio Leguizelo, another name I've butchered, from FC20 on a free. And Finizaz as well on loan. So as we're seeing here, there are other teams towards the bottom end or coming up who spent a lot as well, including Ipswich. Do you reckon that's kind of like telling how competitive it will be this season?
Yeah, I mean, the Championship, both top and bottom is always going to be competitive. But what I like about Plymouth is the fact that they've not just gone to the squad that's brought them up. They've not just gone, okay, we'll bin you all off and go for Championship experience. They've stuck with those guns that have got them to where they are. The results may be that they don't finish as high as they want to in the league. They might struggle, but that sort of loyalty towards the players who got them there is so rare in football now. It's so rare and so hard to come by. I think if you're any football fan, maybe even Exeter, any football fan, and you look at that, you have to respect it.
And a couple of comments as well. Callum Doust, West Ham are signing Ward-Prowse, and I agree, he's an average player without his set pieces. Again, that is a signing that is really going to interest me because West Ham are going full Brexit board this season. Harry Maguire potentially joining from Manchester United. James Ward-Prowse, English players. Though in my opinion, Maguire's good. Ward-Prowse is okay. He can do a job. But yeah, I mean, they're definitely going down an interesting route right there. Let's get into our promoted and our relegated teams. First of all, Championship promoted, and wait for me to get up my notes a minute as my notes are being very slow to open. But we've both picked, and you can do this in the chat as well. We've picked the teams we think are going to get promoted and the teams who we think are going to get relegated from the Championship. So we're not going to go down the entire table. So you picked for yours to be promoted. You picked Leicester in first place. Leicester, they've spent a lot of money this season. They've brought in Connor Cody, Harry Winks from Tottenham Hotspur as well. Why do you think they'll do so well? Because they are a team who've actually made a statement so far in the transfer window, in my opinion.
They have, and you talk about the likes of Harry Winks, the time they brought in. But if you look at their squad as well, there's Vardy, Ian Acho, Patson Daka, Dewsbury Hall, who shone on opening day, absolutely shone. But not only those, they'll get the headlines. The sign for me that puts them to that next level is when Schmeichel left, when they were in the Premier League and Schmeichel left. They had Iverson and they had Danny Ward. Neither of those keepers looked comfortable. Danny Ward especially, very, very sloppy. Didn't like to play out from the back. The fact that they've brought in, and my pronunciation isn't too good, but Hermansen, I I guess too bad because they brought him in, and it's really assured that whole back line. And that for me is the difference to what's going to separate Leicester out. Yes, the likes of Harry Winks, Connor Cody are going to grab the headlines, Ian Atshow, but that goalkeeping position is so important if you're going to make it up this league.
And they've also got a lot of money from the likes of Harvey Barnes, who went to Newcastle for 39 million, James Maddison, who went to Spurs for 40 million. They've made a lot of money as well. And in my opinion, Maresca, he has a lot of money to play around with should they come to January and they think that they need to boost their squad. So do you reckon that Leicester, they'll just dominate the season? Do you reckon they'll simply win all their games or most of their games?
I don't think it's going to be as easy as that. Yes, you can look on paper and go, they got quality here, 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 and here. But this league isn't as simple as that. You don't see that happen very often. Yes, for me, they're going to win this league, and they might do so by a little margin, but by no means are they going to storm this league. If you look at the three sides that come up in Plymouth Wednesday and ourselves, we're not, if you look at the three overall, none of those games are simple games. Leicester fans might look at them and go, okay, League One, just come up, nothing much. But every team in this league is in this league because they've earned the right to be. No team is going to come through and just demolish this league.
So second place, you have Middlesbrough. Middlesbrough, they were absolutely fantastic last season under Michael Carrick. There is an argument to be made that maybe they were up there too early and they kind of had a bit of a hangover towards the end of the season. They ran out of steam. But under Michael Carrick, they've had a brilliant transfer window so far. They brought in Seny Dieng, the goalkeeper from QPR, Morgan Rogers from Manchester City on an undisclosed fee, Rav Vandenberg from PEC's Wall, along a list of many because there were quite a few players that they actually signed. Middlesbrough, they'll be hoping that they can keep Chuba Akpom. He's a very important player. He's been linked to FC Lens. Do you reckon that they can keep him? And explain to us why you think Middlesbrough will get promoted, because they're going to be a brilliant team this season.
We had a talk about Chuba Akpom a couple of days ago, and I'm going to say the same thing again on camera. It, for me, would all depend on how Middlesbrough start this season. If they can get to October, November, December, and be in the top six, which I think they are more than capable of doing, they will be there, then he's going to stay. I've got no doubt about that. If you look at last season and scored 28 goals, you don't do that on a fluke. That's not a one-off. His quality is always going to be there. But if you look at Middlesbrough as a whole, Michael Carrick, absolutely sensational manager. Up there with Kieran McKenna, absolutely fantastic. And you can bring in all these players if you want to. You can look at the likes of Johnny Howson. He's probably in the championship, top of my head, one of the most experienced in the championship. You got a young striker coming through, well, not coming through so much now, but Marcus Fors, who scored 10 goals in 40 appearances last season. Yes, they're bringing in players, but they've also got in building now absolute quality. And the way you complement that is with a good coach. And they've got a fantastic young coach who is only going to improve as well.
And with Middlesbrough as well, you talked about their good young coach in Michael Carrick and their teams as well. They have the momentum from last season, and I reckon their momentum is going to serve them very well as well, because now you have a team who, in my opinion, are now settled into the way that Michael Carrick wants to play. Now that they're settled into his philosophy and his style of play, I agree with you. I reckon they're going to hopefully do one better this season. Though in third, and I'm just going to get my notes up a minute, you have Southampton down as the playoff winners. Russell Martin, he does like a good possession style of football. Southampton, we talked about James Ward-Prowse earlier on and how they're going to lose a few players. How do you reckon they'll fare without James Ward-Prowse? And how do you reckon they'll do this season? Because again, you had them as playoff winners.
I did. And it's looking more likely they are going to lose James Ward-Prowse. And in that case, there's no doubt they're going to have to bring in someone to replace him. There's no doubt. Yes, he's average if taking set pieces away, but in the championship, he was one of the best centre mids you're going to find. If you look at Southampton, if you look at their squad now, you've got loads of Adam Armstrong, absolutely fantastic, and Nathan Teller, as well as Kyle Walker-Peters. Their squad again is fantastic. it may take them a little bit of time to get going, but we see it all the time. There's always one team who can break out, who can get a bit of momentum, who can get going. And it may take them till January to reinforce their squad. But I think when they get there, they'll be a force to be reckoned with.
Do you reckon, though, because Russell Martin, and the one criticism that I've always had about his style of football is the fact that, yes, they do leak goals. And I think sometimes his style of football can be counterintuitive to the way to maybe like the way they go throughout the season, if that makes sense. So can you maybe see a problem with maybe them shipping in goals, maybe a bit of complacency as well? Or do you think Russell Martin maybe would have learned from his previous mistakes at Swansea?
There's no doubt that Russell Martin should have learned. There's no doubt. But I think it's going to take him to January to get these extra reinforcements in. I don't think they're going to come in right now and storm this league. I think they're going to need to find a replacement for Ward-Prowse and maybe one or two more centre-back options. They're not quite there yet, and we've still got 3 weeks after the transfer window. Who knows what can happen? But for me, they're going to need January as well, and that's where they'll kick on.
And I'm probably going to hear about this in the comments earlier, because when I was reading out Middlesbrough's transfers from this season, I was actually reading Southampton's. I've got my notes mixed up. Southampton, they've signed Shea Charles, Josh McNara from Man City, Derek Abu. So I'm going to hear about it in the comments. But Southampton, they've had a brilliant transfer window so far. These things always happen on the first episode of the season. Let's talk about our relegation favourites, though, because the relegation zone this year in the Championship is going to be very interesting indeed. And I'm just going to get out my notes a minute, because I think, and I'm going to read out mine a little later on, but I think we both agreed on who was going to get relegated this season. They're nailed on, in my opinion. In 22nd, you had Huddersfield as going down. So why do you think Huddersfield could be in danger this season?
So let's forget the squad a second and let's look at the manager and behind the scenes. They've got in Neil Warnock. No one can doubt his pedigree. No one can say he's not a fantastic manager. He is. Let's get out 100%. Absolutely fantastic. But does he shine more when he comes in maybe a February, March and help lift the team up out the relegation zone? I think that's his sort of strength, if you like. Him starting off in August and having a full season could go against him, because you've now got this sort of modern football starting to creep up, and you've seen managers in the past sort of get left behind by that, likes of Mick McCarthy, who get left behind by that. And I hate to say it, but I think Neil Warnock's going to go the same way. I just can't see him doing it over a full season, and I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong.
I'd agree with you, because if they come to like January, for example, and Huddersfield are at the bottom of the table, I can't see Neil Warnock sticking around. Like they've lost a lot of players so far this season. In Etienne Kamara, they've lost Matt Daly, who was actually a young player just kind of breaking into the first team. Dwayne Holmes to Preston. Will Boyle, who I was surprised to see go to Wrexham as well. So they've lost a lot of players this season, and they've actually brought in quite a few as well. But the players who they have brought in, the likes of Tom Edwards, Kean Harrett, who was actually from their B team, but they promoted him to the squad alongside Kyle Hudlin. I can't see them setting the world alight, in my opinion. And I think with Neil Warnock, he's retiring soon. Do you reckon he'll stay should things get tough in December or January?
Perhaps it's a bit of a hot take, and perhaps the comments are going to destroy me for this, but if Huddersfield start off badly, I could see Neil Warnock being the first manager to be sacked or walk away. I think he could be the first to be. Yeah, I mean, I may get butchered for saying that. But for me,
I agree.
Go on, mate. Go on. Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting, but
rebuild happening. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think connection to the bit.
I agree, and let's talk about the rebuild a minute. And sorry for interrupting. I'm not used. I don't think any of us are used to recording because it's been a while yet. But I'm interested to see what everybody else in the chat thinks. Because do you reckon that their rebuild will be successful this season, or do you reckon that it'll take for them to get relegated into League One before it happens?
That's an interesting point. Do I think it's going to happen this season? I don't, Will it take relegation to sort of wake the board up and the players manager? I think it would. Huddersfield in League One, even saying it doesn't sound right, but it's almost as if they need a wake-up call. It's almost as if sort of complacency, almost as if that sort of creeped in a little bit there. So yes, it's still in the middle of a rebuild. It takes time, and like we said before in the show, you don't get time in the Championship. This league will eat you up and spit you out again, and I think it's going to take relegation to wake them up.
And below them, you have Rotherham as well. Now, Rotherham, in my opinion, they've actually had a decent transfer window so far. And I'll read off the list of transfers they've made. But Matt Taylor, formerly of Oxford, I believe, he's a manager who is decent in my opinion. I'm actually interested to actually see how he properly does at Rotherham now that he's been given a season. Rotherham, they've signed Andre Green from some Slovakian side. I wouldn't even dare to try and pronounce that. Cafu from Nottingham Forest, who looks like a good player. Grant Toole as a centre-back. Dylan Phillips in goal. Fred Odeyema from Luton on loan. They made plenty of signings. So they've also lost quite a few players as well. Ogbene to Luton, he's the big one. That was a free signing. Wes Harding to Millwall on a free. Richard Wood, their captain, on a free to Doncaster as well. So they've lost a lot of players on a free as well. I agree. I think they're going to struggle this season. How do you see the season playing out for them? And do you reckon that they could maybe find some consolidation in perhaps being competitive?
I almost put Rotherham into the same bracket as I do Huddersfield, and the only reason they're below is just out of luck. Rotherham 23rd. Whenever I see a team who have a lot of transfer activity in the summer, I always straight away get nervous. Rotherham sort of past few seasons have relied on Johansson up front, who's obviously kept them in the league and scored goals. But the problem is when you rely on that one striker, or one player, or the one midfielder, when you rely on one, all it takes is to have a little dip in form and you're bang in trouble. Ogbene to Luton, that's a massive loss. So I put them in the same category as Huddersfield, where they need a rebuild, but they're not going to get it, or not the Championship.
Callum Dowse, Huddersfield have only had one decent season in the last few years when they got to the playoffs under Corberan, but before and since they have had board issues with money under Wagner and Cowley. So, I think that's spot on, really. I think Huddersfield, they've had a lot of board issues. They haven't had a lot of money to bring in players. And personally, I reckon it's miraculous that they're still in the Championship. Neil Warnock, he deserves a lot of credit. Ballon, will this be on Apple iTunes? It will be eventually, and on Spotify. It won't be this week because we still have a lot of tech issues. You've probably heard a lot of tech issues before the show, especially the intro. If you want to laugh, go and listen to that if I haven't edited it out. So it will be up eventually. So let's go to bottom place. And you picked, and we could probably have a juicy discussion on this. QPR. So take it away. QPR getting relegated. I shouldn't be smiling because we are neutral on this show, but why do you think they're going to go down?
Yeah. The club, to pull it in, just to put it straight, are an absolute mess. They've brought in Gareth Ainsworth. Don't get me wrong, fantastic at Wickham. That's as high as he's going to go. He is not, in my opinion, a Championship manager. He will not get the best out of the players he's got there, including the young likes of Andre Dazelle. He will not get him elevated to the next step. You look at their friendlies, and they lost, quote me if I'm wrong, they lost 5-0 to Oxford in a friendly. That just shows, in my opinion, how much of a mess they're in. They're not going to compete this season. I'm going to say they won't compete. I think they're just going to slowly and surely just sink and sink and sink.
And yes, I agree. I think they're a club who at the moment are on the down. And I think Gareth Ainsworth, you've got to give him a little bit of credit because he's good with a club who haven't got expectations. And if you're at QPR, because I remember them being a regular in the Premier League. We all remember that Sergio Aguero guy. That was against QPR. They actually had a decent Premiership team once upon a time. But Ainsworth and QPR, I don't think that is really a fit. Ainsworth is very much I don't want to. He's very much a pragmatic manager, and I don't think QPR can really fit it. And I just have something to talk about a minute in regards to QPR because Gareth Ainsworth, he has a unique man management style. If you remember this, explain Gareth Ainsworth's man management and his man motivation, because earlier in pre-season he got a tribe. I think he got a tribe into the dressing room, and he got the entire players and the staff to dance. So Gareth Ainsworth, I just had to get that image up. What do you make of him as a man manager?
He's definitely unique, shall we say. I don't think you'll find another club in England who would bring in a tribe and game on dancing. I don't think you'd see that anywhere else. Don't get me wrong, I do like Ainsworth. I just don't like him in the Championship. Maybe sort of League One trying to push up, but as Championship, I just don't see his quality being there.
Let's read through the comments a minute. Ainsworth to get sacked, said Doused, and go back to Wickham. I can't wait. He supports Pompey, so he doesn't want them back. But I might expect QPR to sell Dykes this month for some money. Scotland International and all. Tony Fernandez leave QPR now. I agree with that. And Balam, interesting edit there and picture. Yeah, he's talking about the picture I just showed. Yeah, I agree. And I thought I think if something like that happens and you're a player, I wonder what goes through the player's head mentally, because you have to be laughing when you're stood there alongside of a whole load of staff members and your teammates just dancing along to a tribal band. I reckon that was really poor man management, in my opinion. So, Callum Douse, QPR have had a possession style for years and have recruited for that style, and now switching for a pragmatic long ball style doesn't make sense for their squad and recruitment policy. I agree, they've lost Les Ferdinand, who I think was their director of football, so he's been an absolute massive loss for them. Rhys, do you reckon that this QPR fix could easily be resolved by getting rid of Ainsworth? He's a decent manager, in my opinion, just not the right fit. Do you reckon it's as simple as that, or do you reckon it's actually the owners as well?
When it comes to football, I'm never a believer of if you just sack a manager and bring in another one, all your problems just go away and disappear. I don't believe in that. Yes, Ainsworth, I think, is out of his depth, but also you got to look beyond him. You got to look at the owners, and almost as if when you have a discussion about a team that gets relegated, you talk about the managers, you talk about the owners. You very rarely actually talk about the players themselves, and they have to take responsibility as well. So I don't think it's easy as just bringing in another manager. I think culturally, throughout the whole club, it needs to change. Even if it changed. They've had big changes over the next 3 to 4 months, and by January they're in a better place. I think even that is too late. If they're going to have any chance this season, they need to change things. Not in a month's time, not 2 months' time. They change things now, and obviously that's very, very difficult.
And an interesting thing for me is actually that because I think somebody mentioned it in the chat, maybe Valon, about Tony Fernandez. He's already left the club. He's sold all of his shares. So if anybody knows what's happening at the moment, whether they have new owners, whether they actually are without owners at the moment, then do let us know, because their ownership at the moment is absolutely abysmal. And real quick, before we go on to League One and our predictions for League One, here are my quick championship predictions. I had Leeds going up. We haven't spoken about them much so far, but I'm sure we'll talk about them in the upcoming weeks. I think they're going to go up because they have so many talented young players. And I think Daniel Farke, as a manager, he is very well known for getting teams promoted, of course. He got Norwich promoted as well. If he can embed his philosophy and if he can get the team playing to how he wants them to play, then I reckon even with a team or a squad as depleted as Leeds, because they have sold a lot of players as well, and they'll probably sell the likes of Tyler Adams as well, they'll still go up. I had Leicester going up as well, and Middlesbrough going down, QPR, Huddersfield, and I had Sheffield Wednesday as well, but I do agree with Rotherham as well. So let's go on to League One a minute, because League One, there is a lot to talk about with that as well. So League One promoted, and I reckon our picks might surprise a few people, Rhys, because going up, you had Derby to be promoted from League One, which isn't a surprise, but explain why you think Derby will get promoted.
You look through Derby's, before we look at Derby in particular, let's look at League One almost as a bit of a whole. Last season, you had the three standout teams who got promoted, and you could almost put money on the fact they were going to go up. This year, I think League One will be fascinating. There isn't, for me, one or two runaways with this league. It's going to be extremely close, but Derby definitely have that edge. If you look at squad like James Collins, Aaron Cashin, Martin Waghorn, Conor Hurahan, Sonny Bradley. Then you look at Paul Warren, their manager, 3 promotions in the past from this division. I don't see a reason why they can't be promoted, why they can't win the league. If I'm a Derby fan, I'm buzzing because this is their year.
So Derby, they have a lot of experienced players as well, and they've also brought in a lot of players too. They've also kept the likes of Conor Horahan, who is still playing incredibly well indeed. Do you reckon that this year is now or never for Paul Warne? Because in my opinion, I was expecting him to get promoted last season.
Yeah, it was a strange thing that I didn't, to be honest. I think it was just one of them sort of odd seasons in League One where any other season, Derby, they go up. It just happened to be that season was almost unique in that way. This season, it has to be. It simply has to be their season. I got 100% faith in Paul Warren that he will get them there. There's no doubt in my mind.
And let's quickly have a look through Derby's transfer window as well, because they've actually had a fairly successful transfer window, in my opinion. So Derby's transfer window so far, because it hasn't actually closed yet, they've brought in Curtis Nelson from Blackpool, who is a brilliant centre-back. Callum Elder as well, who we both remember very well from Ipswich. Sonny Bradley from the promoted Luton Town, who are now in the Premier League. Brilliant player, played a full season or almost a full season for them last year, was a very important player. Martin Waghorn, who, let's quickly talk about him, Rhys, because I'm surprised that they've brought in Martin Waghorn. Brilliant player, did very well at Ipswich, initially did well at Derby when he joined from Ipswich. What do you make of Martin Waghorn signing for them? Because in my opinion, he's a good player off the bench, but do you reckon that they can rely on him for like an entire season?
I don't think if you're looking for your striker to fire you to promotion, I don't think you look at Martin Waghorn straight away. I think off the bench, he is as good as you're going to find in the whole division. I think now he's getting to the age where he must be sort of getting up to mid-30s now. Wouldn't be putting all my eggs into his basket. I mean, a player I didn't even mention when I was listing them off there was Mendes Lang as well. Absolutely fantastic when you're in League One.
And the reason I mention that is because Connor Washington has also joined from Rotherham. And again, this is kind of like where, it just becomes opinion and you can take it as you want. But Connor Washington, in my opinion, and I don't know what you think, but is he really a player that you can rely upon if you're a good League One team? Because he's been very streaky in the past. So do you reckon that there are more signings to come into Derby?
He is very up and down. I don't know. I'd almost put him in the same category as Waghorn. If you're looking for your sort of one up top sort of system and you're relying on one person, I'm not sure it's Washington. What I will say is I fully expect Derby to sign a striker. I fully expect it, and I expect it to be high profile as well.
And they've also let go of a lot of very important players as well. But I don't think it necessarily matters when you have a team as talented as Derby's. They've let go of Jason Knight, who's gone to Bristol City for 2.3 million. Christian Bellick, who's a player who I highly rate, he's gone to Birmingham for 500k. And a surprising one, and I don't know whether we should save this for the League Two preview, but David McGoldrick, he's gone to Notts County. How big a loss is that?
That's simply an immeasurable loss. Yes, you could put him in the same category as Waghorn and say he's in the further stages of his career, but there's no doubt. Look at the season he had last season. He's still a fantastic League One option, And to be honest with you, I mean, we'll talk about that more when we talk about League Two, but I am shocked he's gone down there.
Callum Doust, I think they've brought Waghorn in as a rotation option as they play 3-5-2. Yeah, that's probably it, to be fair. So he's probably a good utility player off the bench, good experience in the dressing room. Because, you know, like with James Collin up front, who's an absolute brilliant player, highly rated him at Luton, and Nathaniel Mendes-Liang as well. He's decent, like simply a good player to come off the bench during the last 20 minutes, half hour, and, you know, like maybe terrorize the defense a little bit. So in second place, you have Bolton Wanderers. Bolton under Ian Evatt, they've improved season after season, in my opinion. They've consistently been a very entertaining side to watch. And in my opinion, despite there being issues at the club, this is the season for Bolton to get promoted. So why did he have them in second?
It has to be. I mean, you said it with a manager Ian Evatt. They've only got better. They've only done better. Last season, of course, losing in the playoff semi-finals to a very good Barnsley side. But you look at that core of that Bolton side, the likes of Dion Charles, Aaron Morley, George Johnson, Ricardo Santos. It's just a fantastic squad. And the crazy thing about it is, you look at their squad, the average age of the starting 11 is around 22, 23. That squad is only going to get better. And this season, again, last season was very unique in the way it panned out. But this season, there isn't a standout team. And at the very least, they're going to win the playoffs for one. They will go up. They will be playing championship football.
And for me, I absolutely love their defence as well. Rhys Williams, Aaron Morley, Sheehan as well. Brilliant, kind of like diamond in the midfield, or that's how I read it anyway. And Dion Childs and Adebayo up front as well. Absolutely brilliant. They also have a very good defence as well. But let's talk about the players that they've brought in. They've brought in Will Forrester from Port Vale, 22 years old. I really rated him at Port Vale last season, so he can only improve. And Carlos Mendes, who I can't wait to watch in League One. He's going to be an absolute joy to watch alongside of Paris Migoma as well. Let's go on to your playoff winners. You have Barnsley to win the playoffs. Barnsley, very interesting side. They've lost James Norwood to a surprising team in Oldham, but they've still got a very talented squad as well. So what do you make of Barnsley? And why do you think they'll finish third?
Barnsley, again, you look at the fact that he lost their manager, Michael Duff, to Swansea City, and you can look at that as a negative. If you want, you can spin that around and say they're not going to do as well. For me, that squad, it's still got a lot of quality. You can look at Devante Cole, you can look at Herbie Kane, you can look at Nicky Cadden. They're just three players who are absolutely fantastic, and regardless of manager, they will perform. The rest of that, I have actually slightly tweaked my playoff predictions. Barnsley are going to playoffs, no doubt for me. Sorry to say Callum in the chat, but Portsmouth is fourth, Blackpool fifth. I did have Reading sixth, but I've changed them to Peterborough.
So, Neil Collins is interesting in my opinion, simply because he came from Tampa Bay Rowdies, and he's either going to do well in my opinion, or he's going to struggle. He has played a lot of English football before. He played a lot of games for Sheffield United, especially Wolves as well. He used to play for Wolves as well. But he's a new manager. He's a very young manager, and I'm very interested to see how he does, because they've lost a lot of players in the likes of Mads Anderson, Brad Collins, Luke Thomas, who was a good player off the bench. They've lost to Bristol Rovers on the free transfer, or should I say they released, I think, on a free transfer. But they've also brought in some good players as well. Max Watters for about 300k from Cardiff. Ben Killip, who's a very good goalkeeper in my opinion. I don't know where he'll fit in. Mel, I can't pronounce that name. Mel Di Gavini. Somebody should make a compilation of all the names I've butchered. He's a good player as well, and Corey O'Keefe as well. So they've made some very good signings. And Peterborough, I'm very interested that you brought them up as well, because I think they're going to do quite well as well this season. You can probably hear my dogs barking in the background, but for relegation, we can have a juicy debate about this. Exeter in 21st. Why do you think Exeter could get relegated?
I mean, Exeter, for me, if you look at last season, they were very, very patchy. They're very in and out. Look at transfers, they lost Giovanni Brown. That's a massive, massive loss. They almost relied on him at times last season. And I think with teams that, yes, League One is going to be competitive, but look at teams and how they've strengthened. I don't see Exeter faring well.
And for me, Exeter at the moment, they're going through a bit of a crisis financially. They haven't got awful owners, don't get me wrong, but they're not spending as much as they did a couple of years ago. And when you look at their squad, and I think we kind of like saw that on the final day of the season against Ipswich, they very much have a bare bones of a squad and an aging squad as well. So in my opinion, that is a real worry throughout the course of the season. This is despite them beating Wickham, and we'll talk about this a bit later on, 3-0 on the opening day of the season. But when you look at some of the players that they have, I think Caprice is still there as well. These are aging players who, in my opinion, could struggle throughout the course of the season. So they are a real worry for me. And you had Cheltenham in 22nd as well. Cheltenham, another team who are struggling at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And obviously, they've lost their star man in Alfie May. If you look at previous seasons, and you need to score around 40 to 45 goals to have any chance of staying in League One. Since losing Alfie May, I can't see where those goals are going to come from. Yes, they've got players which you can chip in, but when you lose someone, your tails man, it's not easy to replace them.
And I agree, and you kind of wonder where all the goals are going to come from, because they struggled last season, in my opinion. And Wade Elliott, I do like him as a manager, but I wonder whether he actually has enough to really get Cheltenham firing on all cylinders, especially given how competitive the league is this season, and how, in my opinion, he did kind of struggle last season. You look at some of the players they've brought in, Curtis Thompson, Curtis Davies, who, in my opinion, is a very good signing from Derby. These aren't, in my opinion, standout players. I reckon that they are going to struggle. They've also lost Ryan Broom to fellow League One club Fleetwood. They've lost Charlie Brown as well to League Two club Morecambe FC. They've lost a lot of starters, most of them on a free transfer as well. So I agree. I am very concerned about them. Northampton in 23rd. Explain why you think Northampton are going to struggle.
I'm not sure if their squad is going to be able to compete as well as the teams around them. They haven't strengthened enough. You look at the teams who are going to be in and around them, you can sort of pick out 2 or 3 players who you know are going to get out of a hard spot, push you forwards. I look at Northampton and I think it'll be close, but I just don't see them being able to sustain a whole season at League One level.
And I agree. Northampton, they impressed me last season because I thought they were a very resilient team. They finished 3rd in League Two. And League Two last season, if we remember how tight it was, you had to be really consistent to actually stay up there in the top spots. I think Northampton, the only saving grace that they really have is the fact that John Brady is such a talented manager. He's a manager who I've always rated. He's a manager who has been at them for a while. He hit the ground running with them. And if anything, if they can keep hold of him and if another club doesn't come in and snatch him, then they'll do really well. They've signed the likes of Manny Monte as well, who's a really good player. Mark Leonard from Brighton, who I think was with them last season. Tyree Simpson, who has never really been able to find a home yet, but hopefully he'll find a home on loan at Northampton. If anything, the saving grace, in my opinion, for them, despite them also losing quite a few players, is the fact that they do have a very good manager and they've made some very good free signings as well. And don't forget, if you're watching live on YouTube and Twitch, then don't forget to get involved in the chat. Tell us who you think are going to get relegated and promoted from League One and, of course, League Two as well. This might be quite a long show tonight, so hopefully you enjoy it. And, of course, thank you very much to everybody who's tuned in as well. So moving on from Northampton, in 24th, you have Cambridge United. Cambridge, they're a fascinating team to talk about because we know them very well as Ipswich fans, but discuss Cambridge a minute. Why do you think they're going to get relegated?
They've lost two, for them, they've lost two very strong forward players in Sam Smith and Harvey Nibbs. Yes, they replaced them with Getting Hadmi on loan. Hadmi, I'm not convinced by. He came to us meant to be this sort of project player. We take him on, keep him on our wing for a few years. But he's never impressed me. I think he scored on the open day of the season, I think, thinking back. I'm not sure if he's going to be the man you can sort of rely on. You look at other areas of the pitch, you look at Jack Lancaster. Again, absolutely fantastic. But whether or not he can sustain that over a full season. And that's my sort of problem with Cambridge. It's the consistency element.
I think for me, because I like Mark Bonner as a manager, though they really struggled last season. And if it wasn't for beating Forest Green on the last day of the season, they would have been relegated. I'm actually quite interested by what Mark Bonner said a couple of days ago, because Mark Bonner came to the press and he basically said that their aim is to punch above their weight this season. Just to paraphrase what he said we have the right to punch above our weight this season, and we feel as though this could be an open league. Very open league this season, I reckon. Though, if the players can buy into Mark Bonner, and they've always bought into him, he's a very talented manager who got them promoted in the first place, and they can go maybe a little further. I still think they're going to struggle there. The likes of Elias Kachenga, another name who I've butchered, and Sally Kaikai, as well as Jordan Cousins in midfield, will definitely add to them as well. But in my opinion, League One is very competitive indeed. So I kind of agree with you right there. And just to quickly go through my picks before I rattle on for too long. Going up, Bolton, Derby and Charlton, because I liked the way Charlton finished last season. They've made some very impressive signings indeed, and they've impressed me. We'll probably discuss this during the course of the season. They're going up. And going down, Exeter and Stevenage. And I want to talk about the last team with you, because we can just have a discussion about this in general. Reading, who I have to go down. So what do you make of Reading? And how tragic is it to see the ownership situation that they have at the moment?
Whenever fans, I think the fans in these situations, whenever they feel the disconnect between themselves and the club, then the club's in a dire strait, to put it straight on to you. Their business window, I don't think, has been bad at all. They've brought in Charlie Savage, from Forest Green. They've brought in those two Cambridge, as I just mentioned, Harvey Nibbs and Sam Smith. Whether or not they're going to do enough to stay up, I want them to. Of course, brought in Lewis Wing as well. I want them to do enough. But when you see such a disconnect between the owners and the fans, that's where they lose me.
And Dai Yong, he's been such a lazy and poor owner, in my opinion. He simply showed no remorse and no care for the club. If you have an owner like that, who's not going to pump anything into the club, he's not going to bring any players in at all, because I think they're under, and I might be wrong, I think they're under a transfer embargo. Then, they're definitely going to struggle, in my opinion. And I'm just going to get up because I have a picture right here, if you can just bear with me a minute, of how many players they have in their squad, which you would probably be surprised to see. So I can't get it up on the screen, but I'll simply read you through the players that they have. At the moment, they only have about 8 senior players in their team, probably a bit more than that. Their senior players at the moment, before they made these signings, are Tom Hulse, Tom McIntyre, Harley Dean, Harvey Nibbs, Andy Carroll, Sam Smith, Femi Aziz, Avi Ajaya, as well as a smattering of youth players as well. So a bit more than 9, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. They haven't got a big squad at all. So do you reckon that they're going to be at panic stations potentially?
Yeah, there's no doubt. If we get into, I know we've only got 2.5, 3 weeks after the window, but if we get into a week to go to window and this is still the case, it's going to be full panic. Whatever they can get their hands on, they're going to take. There's never any pleasure or joy in seeing a team almost sort of waste away under ownership. Right? It's terrible to see, and I do feel for Reading fans here. There's no care, there's no proper structure, there's no organisation, there's no recruitment. But those are basic things that should be in any football club from step 7 to the Premier League. You should have those things in place. I want them to survive, and I think they will. I think they'll be okay this season. But I said it before we got a championship. January is going to be a massive, massive window for Reading.
And because I think I've contradicted myself about 100 times tonight, because I said that Reading have about 9 players. No, they haven't. That is rubbish. But they've signed the likes of Harley Dean, Sam Smith from Cambridge, Lewis Wing from Wickham, Rashea from Swansea. They've signed a lot of young players as well as many more. And in my opinion, these players are good, but I don't know whether they'll be good enough to maybe get Reading out of this league. And I've also read somewhere, and this could potentially be absolute rubbish, but Puskas could potentially be returning as well. I'm not sure whether I believe that or not. So please correct me in the comments if I am wrong. So yeah, Reading, Sellers, brilliant manager, did well at Southampton considering the situation. So I am interested to see how they do this season. And of course, I have Reading, Exeter and Stevenage to go down. So let's quickly talk about League Two and pick up the pace a minute. Going up from League Two, first place, you have Stockport County. So explain to me why you think Stockport County are going to get promoted.
First things first, this division is going to be incredibly tight and incredibly difficult to predict. And I've got on my list here, I've got about 7 teams I think who could genuinely take a really, really good shot at getting promotion out of League Two. For me, Stockport do just get there first. And the reason behind that is if you look at the other favourites for promotion, look at also Wrexham, you look at Notts County, you can look at Gillingham. There's always, for me, there's a question mark or 2 or 3 questions I can ask about each of those teams. You put Bradford into that category as well. There's a question mark there as well. For me, Stockport, maybe I'm popular, but I think they've got a little bit of an edge.
And another team here have as well, and apologies, I've messed up in the notes a little bit, but you actually had Bradford going up as well. So Bradford, if I can quickly correct myself, you actually had Bradford going up in first place. So Bradford under Mark Hughes, it's now or never in my opinion for Bradford, isn't it?
Yeah, it simply has to be. If you look at last season and the amount of goals that they let in after the 85th minute, it was simply a joke. And that was the reason the reason for finishing in the playoffs instead of going up automatically. And there's no doubt that Marquis will address that and has been working on that over the summer. And if they can sort that little sort of section out, a little concentration towards the end of games, they should be okay. But that's a massive if.
So yes, just a correction there. You actually had Bradford going up in first place. Bradford, they're an interesting team in my opinion because they have a top squad and a top manager as well. They were overly reliant on Andy Cook in my opinion last season, and I don't think fans are too thrilled about that. And ultimately, in my opinion, that made them very one-dimensional. Hughes, though, he underperformed last season, and in a way that is a compliment because I reckon the sky is the limit for them. They have a brilliant midfield of Richie Smallwood, Adam Clayton, and Kevin McDonnell, who are some very talented players, with Ash Taylor and Matty Platt in defence as well. So I agree. I reckon they're going to do really well this season. Stockport County is your pick for first place. And in second place, you have Wrexham. We don't need to introduce Wrexham. Billionaire owners probably in Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. The eyes are on them, the cameras are on them as well. But Wrexham, they're going to be a very exciting team to watch this season, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, we don't need to sit there and tell the whole story about Wrexham. I think every man and their dog knows what's happened with that club. I said before I had a little question mark about every team that I've put forward, and with Wrexham, the question mark is over Paul Mullen. In the preseason friendly, he obviously, unfortunately, suffered that punctured lung after a pretty poor challenge from a goalkeeper. And for me, it will depend on how quick he can get back to fitness and how quick we're back in the team. Realistically, it's going to be 2-3 months, I think, before he's even stepping foot back onto the pitch. And potentially that could be the difference. And in that case, you're going to need your team to step up to the plate. And for me, that little difference of not having Paul Mullen could be their difference as well.
And Paul Mullen as well is going to be a real loss for the start of the season. And just quickly, because we'll talk about it briefly later on as we're going long tonight, but Wrexham, they lost to the MK Dons. Do you reckon that kind of showed how much they are going to miss him for the time being?
Yeah, I think it's about on a broader scale. Any team that gets promoted, obviously they're on cloud nine. I think they take the world on. You almost need a result against a sort of against an MK Dons team. MK Dons almost put you back on, to give you a reality check, almost to put your feet back on the ground again. So that's not a bad thing. It'll just depend on how quick I think Mullen gets back to action.
And yeah, Wrexham, they've got a very good squad in my opinion. Ben Taser, Jordan Tunnicliffe and Ewan O'Connell performed very well last season. The only worry that I've had is that, in my opinion, they've had a poor transfer window. They've only signed 2 players because I haven't written this down, in James McLean and somebody else. I think it was Will Boyle from Huddersfield is who they've signed. So they've only signed 2 players in the transfer window, which is concerning. And they've also lost out on the likes of James Norwood. He went to Oldham. And Nick Powell as well, he went to Stockport County. So that is, in my opinion, a bit of a concern. Phil Parkinson, their team played the roles of the flat track bully very well last season, and they are going to be managing very big expectations this season. The question that I have for you, Rhys, and chat as well, is that Phil Parkinson, when he was at Sunderland, he didn't necessarily deal with the pressure very well. He had cameras on his face. Of course, Sunderland had that documentary back then. And ultimately, he struggled a little bit under the circumstances and under the pressure. Do you reckon that could happen this season? And if there was a more attractive option for a manager than Phil Parkinson, do you reckon Wrexham will go in for them?
I think from Phil Parkinson's point of view, I think lessons would have been learned from the Sunderland. There's no doubt lessons should have been learned anyway. I think when you go to a team like Wrexham, I can't remember if he was there when the ownership happened or not. I can't quite remember. But if you're going there with cameras. You know what the expectation is. Potentially, I mean, I'm sort of talking as I think here. Potentially, they look elsewhere. Wrexham for me will all depend on how they start. It will all depend on those opening 2 and 3 months.
And I think you're spot on right there. They're a very interesting team as well. I'm confused with the idea that they went to the States during pre-season. I wouldn't be surprised if they were very jet-lagged during their last game, but they're a very exciting team to follow and to watch indeed. And you had Notts County in third place as well. So Notts County, they're a team who I'm really impressed with as well. They're actually the bookies' favourites to get promoted. They've signed the likes of David McGoldrick to replace Ruben Rodriguez. They've signed Jody Jones as well and Dan Crowley. Notts County, they're going to be really special to watch this season, aren't they?
Yeah, they're going to be simply incredible. I mean, the goal that McGoldrick scored, I don't know if you saw on opening day, but the goal he scored was simply fantastic. He's going to go there. He's going to rip League Two up. I've got no doubt about that at all. So you can look at Langstaff as well. You can look at Bostock. There's so many players in that team who can take this Notts County side up a gear as well. And for me, there's no doubt they get promoted. There's no doubt. It all just depends on where they are.
And I reckon they did a brilliant job to bring in Aidan Stone as a goalkeeper as well. They struggled last season to get in a good shot stopper. So I reckon he's the perfect replacement. And they are going to do very well, in my opinion. And playoff winners, you had Gillingham, who under Neil Harris, we all remember him from Millwall. They've done very, very well indeed. In January of last season, they were bottom of the table, which in my opinion is quite shocking to think about, considering how well they turned things around. As I said, brilliant manager. They picked up the second most amount of points from January onwards. They've also signed some very good players in Connor Masterson and Johnny Williams. They're a very direct team, and Gillingham under Neil Harris, this is becoming a bit of a cliche, but the sky really is the limit for them, isn't it, Rhys?
Yeah, I mean, the feel-good factor around Gillingham now is simply off the charts. You know, to bring in the likes of Johnny Williams, which for any League Two side, he walks into that team when fit. There's no doubt about that. The feel-good's incredible. The ownership is just fantastic. I wouldn't be surprised to see them go top three. I really wouldn't. The only reason why I've put them into the playoff winners is just that little nigging doubt about how far that feel good factor can take Gillingham. And is that old cliche, but the sky is the limit for Gillingham.
And I'm just going to quickly read through some of the comments a minute. Paul McGarry, great to see the show back, lads. Should be brilliant. A brilliant season ahead. I can barely read the comments. Sorry about that. I'm not a great reader. Thank you very much. We're glad to be back as well. 18 Dapper losing Ironside to Doncaster could be a big loss for them. Yeah, we agree that is an absolutely massive loss as well. And we're going to read through the rest of the comments once we get to the questions at the end of the show. So if you have any questions to ask, then get them either on Twitter at OverTheBarFB or type them in the chat if you're on YouTube or Twitch. And just to get the notes up a minute, as you can see, I'm brilliant at organisation. You had, and I think we actually had our relegation favourites as the same. In 23rd place, you had Morecambe. So Morecambe, they're in worlds of trouble at the moment. And it's a real shame to see, because a couple of weeks ago, it looked as though they were going to get in new potential owners. That has gone quiet, so we can all assume that ultimately didn't happen. They probably haven't got owners. So Morecambe, a team who are struggling financially at the moment. Half their players have been released. They have a new squad, basically, who all have question marks over their head. Derek Adams, do you reckon he can pull off a miracle and can keep them up?
I mean, if he can do it, it will be a fantastic miracle. There's no doubt about that. When you look at your investor group, and I think it's a Bond group off the top of my head, who own, I think, about 80% of the club, and they've gone incredibly quiet. That's never really a good sign. You don't want that from your owners. They've fought relegation 7 seasons out of the past 8. For me, this is one too far. This will be the one that seals their fate. And I hate to say it, because I think Morecambe scream to me League One. They scream quality, but unfortunately, I think this is just one push too far.
So yeah, I agree with you there, and it's a shame to see really because there are loads of teams in League Two who are in real financial straits at the moment in regards to their owners. Morecambe being one, Newport, who are actually a fan-owned club, they're struggling financially and they won't have any backers as well. So who knows how that will happen? I have Newport to go down. And Tranmere Rovers as well. The fans aren't too happy with their owners as well. They think they should really be doing better than they currently are. But again, talking about poor owners, and I don't think anybody watching right now will like the owners of this team. Crawley Town, who are owned by Wagner United. Preston Johnson, in my opinion, look, he probably has good intentions, but he's an absolute clown as an owner. He banned a fan a couple of weeks ago for leaking the new goalkeeper kit on Twitter, which was absolutely horrific. And they've also lost a lot of players as well, the likes of Ashley Nadasan and Jack Powell as well. They've all departed the club. Excuse me, but they've also loaned in the likes of Luca Ashby Hammond. He's a very good young goalkeeper. So before my voice gives out, they've signed some okay players, but the owners are absolute clowns. They aren't very good at all. I'm literally just slandering them at the moment. But Crawley Town, why don't you think they'll do well this season? Why do you think they'll go down?
Yeah, unfortunately, I hate to be negative, but I haven't got a positive thing to say about Crawley Town. When off the field, when your club is in that much mess, it's so difficult to translate from that mess to performances on the field. That correlation simply does not work. I think in a friendly, they lost 6-1 to Portsmouth, I want to say. And that's only the next division up. And the gulf in quality in that game, it was for the world to see. It was terrible, really. Another team I want to put into the mix is actually Colchester. Um, I don't think they'll go down, but I think they will struggle. And the reason why I say that is because they've lost a lot of experience this winter in Luke Chambers, who's announced his retirement, Freddie Sears, and Cole Scrooge has gone on to manage at Berry Town. And when you lose three players of that caliber, three voices, three leaders, that's going to leave a massive hole. That's going to leave a big void for the manager and the owner, who again I'm not a fan of. To replace that's going to be incredibly difficult. I don't think they'll go down, but it's going to be a long season for them.
Do you reckon, because like I have the nickname for this contingent as Dad's Army, basically a whole load of really odd players who came in from Ipswich: Elskis, Emir Hees, Luke Chambers, Freddie Sears. I think Alan Judge has been released as well. I might be wrong there. Do you reckon that actually those players being released could be a good thing for them?
It could be. It depends what end of the stick you look at it from. When we had our clear out at Ipswich a couple of years ago, that was a good thing. Look where we are now, and that's the positive of it. That's what can happen if you have a clear out. The negatives and the sort of drawbacks can be so the consequences can be so high, especially when you're in League Two, especially when you get dragged into that sort of that relegation so easily as well, and you lose three leaders, three voices, three examples. I don't think you're going to replace them easily.
And yeah, I think you're spot on by saying that. I reckon it's going to be a real struggle for them this season. The only thing that I will say is that they have a lot of really talented young players, Marshall Miranda being one of them. Young players who I reckon that if they lean into, because Ben Garner is a very good manager and he can get teams firing on all cylinders. We saw that when he was managing Swindon. Then I reckon they could potentially do well. But very frustrating times for them as well. But League Two, very exciting season this year. Any other clubs that you want to talk about before we go on to the preview?
I think that was it, mate. Yeah. Oh, I will just, if it's okay, go back to the Championship a second. And I sort of touched on Leeds and the fact that they came down. And just to remind everyone in the chat, I've got Leeds in fourth. We bring in Daniel Farke even, who's got the pedigree and managerial CV that he's got. There's no doubt, and it pains me to say this, There's no doubt he's a fantastic manager. But I said it before in the fact that it takes time. His style of play is really, really distinctive. It's keep it, possession, possession, possession. So, people in the chat, people listening back, maybe screaming at me and going, no, Leeds are going to finish third, second, first. That sort of period between his ideas in the dressing room and on the training ground to actually every Saturday against footballing teams, because the Championship is full of footballing teams this season, will equate, in my opinion, to Leeds. They will finish in the playoffs. They won't necessarily go up this year.
And again, the only worry that I have about them is that their team's been absolutely gutted. And, it was always going to happen, in my opinion, because, they were never going to keep the likes of Tyler Adams, for example. And a lot of their big earners as well were and inevitably would want to leave. Max Wober, he wanted to leave. He went to Borussia Mönchengladbach. Robin Koch as well. He went to Eintracht Frankfurt. Rodrigo as well. These players, they're not going to want to stay in the Championship, are they? They're going to want to save their international careers. So do you reckon that because of the amount of players that they've sold, and they haven't actually signed too many players yet, do you reckon that can maybe be a struggle for them?
Yeah, I mean, they will struggle. Not all season. It may take them a month or two to get in the groove, but they will struggle for that period. Yes, I've let players go and haven't signed perhaps the caliber to replace them, but they've still got players in the club like Nonto, Somerville, Sinisiela. They are players who should rip this league up. They should rip this league up. So there's not an excuse for Leeds. The only thing I will say is that it'll take time, and fans have to be patient, which we know in football is very difficult. But be patient while the manager infiltrates his message of how he wants to play.
It will just be a very interesting season for Leeds. Like Daniel Farke, and I hate to say this because, the team, it's obvious who I support, but I like him as a manager. He did well at Norwich, got them relegated, which was very sad indeed. But yeah, it's interesting to see how they do. Let's quickly go on to the preview or the review before you do the preview of this weekend's Championship action. So first of all, we're going to talk about this last weekend's match day, first match day of the season. I'll quickly read through them before we talk about some of the results. On the Friday, we had Sheffield Wednesday 1, Southampton 2. On Saturday, the 5th of August, we had Blackburn Rovers 2, West Bromwich Albion 1, Bristol City 1, Preston North End 1, Middlesbrough 0, Millwall 1, Norwich City 2, Hull City 1, Plymouth Argyle 3, Huddersfield Town 1, Stoke City 4, Rotherham United 1, Swansea 1, Birmingham City 1, and Watford 4, Queen's Park Rangers 0. And on the Saturday, we had Leicester City 2, Coventry City 1, Leeds United 2, Cardiff City 2, and Sunderland 1, Ipswich Town 2. So let's quickly get the Ipswich game out of the way because we both saw that game. One of the worst 13 minutes of my life. It was an absolute drag to watch. But we came away with the win. We played well. But Sunderland, they played well as well. So Sunderland, I was impressed by them. Were you?
Yeah, Sunderland this season are going to be a massive, massive threat in this league. Their midfielder, Joe Bellingham, absolutely fantastic. He ran the show definitely for the first half against us. And if he buries that chance, which he really should have done, Sunderland can 1-0 up, and it's a totally different game.
So Ipswich, because we had a very good team, and we also played players that wouldn't necessarily start every week. Donastian replacing Harry Clark as well, among some other changes to the squad as well. Do you reckon that game will teach us a lot? Because that game was tough. We learned a lot about the mistakes that we made, about what not to do when the opposition goes down to 10 men. So do you reckon that game was a learning curve for us as well?
Yeah, I think every game playing Championship can be considered as a learning curve. we had Hladky in goal. He doesn't start every week when Walton's fit. Unfortunately, Walton's been ruled out for a few months now. But Hladky in that opened sort of 10, 15 minutes until he found his feet and calmed down a little bit. He was making far too many soft mistakes, giving the ball away too easily. So there are lessons to be learned in that respect. You can talk about the 10-man Sunderland and what we could do better, but I see it from the point of the fact that I thought Sunderland really, really stepped up. Their goal, I don't think we can do much about it. Yes, Sebastian gets beat a little bit too easy for my liking, but it's a great finish. So for me, what's around 10 men, it's not necessarily what we could learn, but I think that shows the spirit of Sunderland.
And I'm sorry, but Freddie Ladapo had to, because there was one part in the game where he was dragging the ball out wide. He went on like a run by himself. He had to score that, or he had to at least have passed it. There was a ridiculous moment in the game, wasn't it?
Oh, let's just say if they equalised in the added on time, then one man's getting pelters in the dressing room after that.
Absolutely agree. That was one of the, that was a tough moment in the game. Now we're going to quickly go on to League One. First of all, before we go on to League One, any results that surprised you this weekend?
From Championship, nothing really too surprising. In a negative way, I'm going to bring up Watford for QPR 0. I thought from the opening game, QPR might have some sort of like a rejuvenation. They might sort of wake up and go, right, okay, this is the real business now. They're short we're made of, and unfortunately, they just crumbled to a really good Watford side.
Yeah, I agree. And QPR, they were very, very poor in that game. Andre Dazelle, I can't believe he made the 90 minutes of that game. I didn't think he played well at all. Plymouth Argyle 3, Huddersfield Town 1. Plymouth Argyle, Morgan Whittaker and Ballymumba are absolutely brilliant signings for them. They played very well indeed. And Blackburn Rovers 2, West Bromwich Albion 1. Blackburn, I thought they were going to struggle this season because Blackburn have been made very aware that this season they're not necessarily going to have the financial backing that they did last season. They've lost Ben Brereton Diaz. And I have a feeling that John Dahl Thompson this year will get incredibly frustrated with the players who he can't bring in. So I was pleasantly surprised to see them beat West Bromwich Albion, as I do rate this Blackburn Rovers side. Now on to League One. And don't forget, if you're watching live on Twitch and on YouTube, get your questions into the comments. Tell us how you think your side is going to do this season. But there are a lot of games to read through, so I'm going to start from the top. This was the last match day in League One. Barnsley 7, Port Vale 0. Blackpool 2, Burton Albion 0. Bolton Wanderers 3, Lincoln City 0. Cambridge United 2, Oxford United 0. Carlisle 1, Fleetwood Town 1. Charlton Athletic 1, Leyton Orient 0. Derby County 1, Wigan Athletic 2, Northampton Town 0, Stevenage 1, Portsmouth 1, Bristol Rovers 1, Reading 0, Peterborough United 1, Shrewsbury Town 1, Cheltenham Town 0, and Wycombe Wanderers 3. Wycombe Wanderers 0, Exeter City 3, teasing the Wycombe Wanderers fans right there. So first of all, I think it's obvious the game that we need to talk about. Barnsley 7, Port Vale 0. Port Vale, they are a team who I quite like. I don't think they're going to do too badly this season, but that was an absolutely horrific game with Devante Cole scoring a hat-trick, Dan Jones scoring, Liam Kitchen getting a goal as well, along with John Russell and Andrew Dallas. What did you make of that game? And that only cements our opinion that Barnsley are going to do well this season.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Barnsley are one of the best sides in this division this season. There's no doubt about that. Port Vale are no pushovers. Let's not pretend that Port Vale are going to finish rock bottom. Are going to get beat 8-0 every week. That's simply not going to happen. That was maybe just a sort of opening day, sort of not quite with it just as yet, and a good enough Barnsley will capitalise. Devante Cole getting a hat-trick on opening day, that's as good as it gets really for a striker. Barnsley for me no doubt will just keep this up and we'll just keep going.
Reading 0, Peterborough United 1. Reading, they didn't play too well at all in that game. And Peterborough, I reckon, because you briefly mentioned it earlier on, that you reckon that they're going to get into the playoffs. They are a team, in my opinion, especially with the players that they have, who are going to do well. So what did he make of that game? And Darren Ferguson, he's in for a good season, isn't he?
Yeah, there's no doubt. Darren Ferguson always leads Peterborough. They're always there or thereabouts when it comes to sort of top six in League One. Despite when we talk about the off-field problems that unfortunately happen at Reading, but you still got to turn up to the Majeski, which can be a very difficult stadium to play at, and still turn out a win in League One. That is no mean feat. You've got to give credit to Peterborough. As much as we've slandered Reading in this episode, Peterborough were fantastic.
And Exeter, they've started the season very well indeed. They beat Wycombe Wanderers 3-0. Wycombe could potentially struggle this season, though Jack Aitchison, Will Ameson, and James Scott scored for Exeter. We can't read too much into this because this is only the first game of the season. But how big a win was that for Exeter?
Oh, it's massive. I think any team that can, on opening day, can A, keep a clean sheet, and B, score 2 or 3 goals is as good as open day can get. I'm not going to sit here and say Exeter, rip up my predictions from earlier. It's all going to, go on its head now. It is only game week 1. I'm not getting ahead of myself. We'll take it as it goes with Exeter.
And again, a very long episode this evening. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined us in chat. We really we really appreciate having you here. We're now going to go on to League 2. Real quickly, Accrington Stanley 3, Newport County 0. Colchester United versus Swindon Town was postponed. Apparently, they released 7 players who had to go to a nursing home. Crawley Town 1, Bradford City 0. Alexandra 2, Mansfield Town 2. Doncaster Rovers 0, Harrogate Town 1. Forest Green Rovers 0, Salford City 2, Grimsby Town 0, AFC Wimbledon 0, Morecambe 2, Walsall 1, Stockport County 0, Gillingham 1, Sutton United 5, Notts County 1, Tranmere Rovers 1, Barrow 2, and Wrexham 3, MK Dons 5. So any games that stand out for you there, Rhys?
There's only one game to start with, mate, isn't there? And that's Wrexham 3, MK Dons 5. Every week I do my predictions on an app called Fan Hub, and everyone, it was 95% of people backed Wrexham to beat MK Dons, and it goes to show you these games are so difficult to predict. From an MK Dons point of view, that's a massive result. I can't quite remember what Wrexham have called their ground, but I'll call it the race course. It's a difficult place to go to. The fans expect the best now because of all the press that has come with their two multi-billionaire owners. Look at MK Dons, and Moisa is a striker that, not just because he scored in game week, but because Moisa is a striker I've always had a soft spot for. I do really like him. If he can keep that going, absolutely fantastic.
And some other results that stand out for me as well. Stockport County 0, Gillingham 1. Gillingham, they continued their brilliant form from last season as they beat Stockport County. Sutton United 5, Notts County 1. Sutton, I'm just going to see where I had them in my predictions in a minute, because Sutton, they're a team who I reckon could not struggle this season, but I don't think they're going to do as well as they did last season. They have a lot of gaps in their squad, in my opinion, though they'll need to tactically adapt this season. And I think a lot of teams have figured out the 4-4-2 that they played last season. They have a risk, or they're going by a risk of potentially becoming very one-dimensional. So it'd be very interesting to see whether Matt Gray can figure that out. Accrington Stanley 3, Newport County 0. I think Newport County, I think I briefly spoke about them earlier on anyway, but they are going through a world of problems at the moment. So they're a fan-owned club, as I mentioned earlier on, and they had a lot of financial losses last season. So their budget this season is massively reduced, and there aren't a lot of wealthy benefactors for them as well, especially since they're a founding club. They've lost a lot of key players as well, though I reckon they're going to get relegated this season. They were beaten by Accrington, who've actually had a very decent transfer window. I'm very concerned for them indeed. So I'm afraid this week we're not going to go through all of the previews for the upcoming weekend because I reckon we'll simply be here for too long. What we are going to do instead is we are going to go through your questions, and we'll obviously talk about the next match day next Wednesday when we are with you again. So I'm just going through Twitter a minute to see whether there are any questions. If you want to ask a question over on Twitter, then tag us in at @OverTheBarFB. Whilst I have a look for the questions, we'll take one from the live chat. This is going to take me a while to find again because I'm not a tech expert. Ballum, thoughts on Wrexham's bad start? Ipswich will want to compete, and it will be they will be top of the league. Oh yeah. So first of all, what are your thoughts on Wrexham's bad start?
Look, it's game week 1. I'm not going to sit here and say they're going to flop after one game. That's simply not realistic. You've got to look at the pre-season tour. Going to America is simply bonkers, in my opinion. There's so many factors to this game than first meet the eye. You've got the Paul Mullen injury. You've got the weight of expectation. You've got other fans looking in, making opinions. You've got the jet lag. There's so much going in and riding on that first game that if I'm following Wrexham or if I'm a Wrexham fan, I'm just thinking, right, we take a deep breath, we get August out of the way, people come off our backs, start focusing on their own team, and in September we hit the ground running.
Ballum, I think we answered this earlier about will this podcast be available on Apple Podcasts. Yeah, we've had a couple of tech issues this week, which is inevitable, really, as this is a new show. Again, if you want something amusing to listen to and you're listening live, listen to how I messed up at the beginning of the show. But yeah, we'll be on Apple Podcasts and Spotify next weekend, or maybe the weekend after. Let's see, what else is there? Charlton will try and get promoted. They started well in week 1. Yeah, I'm really impressed by Charlton. They've lost Raksaki there. While they didn't lose him, he returned to Crystal Palace. So I reckon he'll be a huge loss for them. Ballum, what a bad start for Notts County 2, a heavy defeat. Over the bar, Ian has been doing vlogs. Did anybody see the Barrow goal away to Tranmere? I didn't. Did you see that goal, Rhys?
I haven't seen it, mate. No, I'll be honest.
Yeah, we'll have to have a look and give you our thoughts about it next week. But Ian, he does amazing match day vlogs. If you want to watch them, as they are absolutely brilliant, then head over to Over the Bar's YouTube channel. You won't be disappointed. Here's one for you. Do you think Ipswich fans will... Do you think... I am absolutely butchering the English language tonight. Do you think... I can't even speak. Do you, deep breath, as Ipswich fans, think that parachute money is a big problem now? Hull have started badly, and also get English lessons. I agree. No, in all seriousness, parachute payments, do you reckon that they're going to be a big problem?
This will all depend on which side of the fence you see it and how your team is doing. Me personally, because of the investment that we've got behind us, I'm not worried about what any other team is doing. As much as a cliche, I don't really mind or couldn't care less that the 3 relegated teams have come in with a bag full of money. That doesn't bother me. If we get payments, again, that doesn't bother me. The only thing that matters to me as a town fan is that whoever comes into our club just gives 110%. That's always the bottom line. The championship, even if you take money out of the equation, is still an incredibly competitive league. So I don't think the parachute payments would stop any of that or would sort of kill the vibe of the championship, that's for sure.
ATID, he asks, are Argyle pissing the championship? Real quickly before I go to you, I'm really impressed by Plymouth this season. I live in Cornwall, moved down a couple of years ago from up country, Suffolk. Plymouth are my local team nowadays, and they're a team who I really enjoy watching. Mumba, Morgan Whittaker. They're players who live in my head rent-free as they're so good. They're absolutely brilliant, and I reckon in the transfer window, Plymouth have possibly had one of the best in the Championship. I don't think you'll go down. I reckon you'll probably challenge for top half of the table, maybe if you're lucky, playoffs, because I do rate you that much. So, Rhys, Plymouth Argyle, we were talking about them briefly yesterday, weren't we? But what do you make of Plymouth? And yeah, how impressed have you been by their transfer business?
First and foremost, I've been really, really impressed and taken back. I think to go back to the players who have won you promotion just shows the absolute class and quality at Plymouth. Unfortunately, I'm not as positive as perhaps you are, Ben, in the fact that they can get top half. I think they. I don't want to say this because I do like Plymouth as a club. They might struggle. They're in no danger of getting relegated. No danger at all. I think it's going to take time for those players who had in League One to find their feet in the Championship. And by the time that happens, so that might take us up to January. Plymouth are a team, I'm taking early doors to be very busy in the January transfer market, because by then you're going to find out with Finazaz, Bally, Mumba, Morgan Whittaker, etc., Ryan Hardy, you're going to find out with those players who is going to be able to make the step up. I hope all of them can. I hope all of them can. Which players perhaps can't and needs to be replaced. So January is a big transfer window for you guys. I don't think you'll be top half, but I think you'll definitely surprise a few.
ATID, by the way, I was asking out of satire, but yeah, I'm happy with lower mid-table, can't lie. Yeah, I just love Plymouth so much, to be fair. I don't think I've ever admitted that about a team, but they're a team who I really do rate. And yeah, you'll probably hear me talking about them a lot this season as maybe the team to keep an eye on. But there are plenty of teams like that in the Championship, and I'm sure we'll shine the spotlight on them all. So again, we have so many questions tonight. Thank you very much for taking part in the show, to everybody watching live. 18 Dapper, I think we already answered that. Dan Green, evening fellas, really great to have the show back. Hope you had a good summer. Thoughts the opening weekend had plenty of surprises. Send my question into you via Twitter. We'll get onto the Twitter questions after this. Balham on the two teams to go down from League Two. I will go either MK Dons, Crawley, Barrow, or Colchester. Interesting about Colchester. And do you expect Salford and Wrexham to sign some players before the end of the window? Rhys, take it away, because Wrexham, we spoke about their transfer business so far. Do you reckon they'll sign more players?
Wrexham, no doubt they're going to bring in, I think, 2, 3, maybe even 4 bodies. Perhaps I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't lose Paul Mullen. I think that almost puts a stamp on a striker coming in. Perhaps it'll be a short-term loan deal from the Championship. Salford, again, they're in that same sort of bracket for me. They both will sign players. I've got no doubt about that.
And Balham, take care. Time for Ian's match vlog for me. Enjoy, and yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you next week as well. So we're now on to the Twitter questions. Before we go too long tonight, because we have been on for a long while, Chris Saunders, biggest shock from the opening day. So for me, the biggest shock of the opening day was Wrexham losing to the MK Dons. I'm not too surprised when I think about it, because they are new to the league, and I think Wrexham are missing Johnny Mullin. But what is your biggest shock from the opening day?
My biggest shock, and it's probably in a positive way, if I had to pick one, I'll go one for the Championship and one from League One. I'll let the chat decide what's the biggest shock. The Barnsley game in League One, don't get me wrong, I had Barnsley ticked to win that, but to win that 7-0, I think is simply outstanding. So that's a shock in a good way. And then you look at, I took the time out to watch the Championship games on Sky, and I thought Leeds against Cardiff, if that's going to be the standard the Championship is going to be setting, that's going to be simply incredible.
Dan Green. Now, this is a very good question, in my opinion. Great to see the show back, Ben. Who has been the signing of the summer, and which club have the most business left to do, in your opinion? So, I haven't really put much thought into the best signing of the summer, but I can quickly, before I go to you, Rhys, name a couple of players who I do think are going to hit the ground running. Aaron Ramsey at Cardiff, that immediately puts Cardiff into a different spotlight. I reckon Cardiff are just about going to survive this season. That is a really decent signing, in my opinion. I've been really impressed by that. Nick Powell, Stockport County, if he can stay fit, he'll be an absolutely brilliant player there, and I do hope he does stay fit. David McGoldrick as well to Notts County. That's arguably one of the signings of the summer. There's a lot to go through, but Rhys, who is your signing of the summer so far?
As soon as you asked, I was thinking McGoldrick to Notts County. That was the one that came to mind straight away. I know what I'm going to, I'll get pelters for this because obviously I'm in a town shirt. But I think Amari Hutchison is going to be absolutely outstanding. I think he'll go on to win Young Player of the Season. I really do in the Championship. I rate him that highly. We saw him in the first friendly. He looked absolutely fantastic. We saw a brief cameo against Sunderland. You can't judge too much off that because of the situation that game was in. But even if I wasn't a Town fan, I think if you bring in someone like Amari Hutchison into the Championship, that's simply outstanding.
And ATID, Bally and Wits at Argyle are first and second £1 million players in our history, which is very interesting, really. I think they can easily be up there as signings of the season as well. Other players as well. Connor Cody, okay, controversial opinion, but I don't rate Connor Cody as a signing. Do you think he's any good?
This is where me and you may have a first disagreement of this podcast. I think that's a fantastic signing. I think to bring in someone with that sort of pedigree who has played in the Premier League, not necessarily going to say going to start and play every minute, but just have that voice, that experience, that presence in the dressing room. I think that's simply unmatched.
Do you reckon there's a risk of because they've signed players who, and again, this is easily this can be debated, but do you reckon that there's a risk of signing players who've struggled in their last couple of seasons? Because Connor Cody, he lost his place in Everton's squad last season, and Harry Winks, he got relegated with Sampdoria last season. So do you reckon that could potentially be a risk?
There's always risks when you bring in players who maybe haven't performed at their highest in the previous season. There's always a risk. But for me, that almost comes away from the player and how good your manager is at coaching and the support and the staff and the coaching you do. As long as that's in place at Leicester, which, judging by that first game, it's clear to see that it is in place, I think they'll be fine.
Just quickly reading through the Twitter, because I'm sure we've missed some questions right here. If we have, then many apologies. We'll get on to them next week. Biggest shock from the opening day. We've already gone through that. This is just going to be about 3 minutes of me fumbling around talking to myself as I ask or see whether there are any more questions. Always makes for fantastic content. People do love dead air. Yeah, I think that's about it. So again, thank you very much to everybody who's joined us tonight, and thank you very much to Rhys. He'll be a regular. He'll be on every week. I'm rubbish at ending shows, but yeah, I'll get better throughout the season. So Rhys, because last season with David always had to save me from literally creating the worst outro possible. So before we go off the air, what are you expecting from the next match day, and are you excited for the season ahead?
Oh, I mean, I said at the start, I'm optimistic. I'm buzzing. I think all three divisions, Championship, League One, League Two, are so difficult to predict. I think the standard is extremely high. I think it's going to be a fantastic season. Towards the next game week, again, if we can have this level of standard, this level of goals, this level of surprises with teams potentially not living up to their potential or potentially slipping down. It's going to be a fantastic season.
And I agree. I'm really excited to be here every week with you, Rhys, and of course, everybody in the chat at the moment. Again, the one thing that I am good at, I may not be good at outros, but I'm very good at reading off a script. You can join us every week on Twitter at @OverTheBarFB. I'm not very good at reading scripts, sorry. You can join us every week on Twitter at @OverTheBarFB. That's what I meant. You can join us on YouTube and Twitch every week. You can simply find them by typing Over the Bar FB onto Google. And in the next coming weeks, we've spoken about this already on the show, but we will be on Spotify, Amazon, and of course, Apple Music. I'm trying to create my own RSS feed for it, as I don't want to pay too much for, like streaming rights, things like that. So I'm taking a bit of a different route for it this season, but we will get there eventually, and we will be online eventually as well. And of course, you can follow Over the Bar online as well, because we have a fantastic website for you to get involved in. If you wanted to visit us online, you can visit us at www.otbfootball.net. There are some fantastic websites. God, I'm tired. There are some fantastic articles on there and some great content as well. And you can follow us on YouTube at Over the Bar FB as well. First show of the season. I'm tired. I've messed up quite a bit tonight, but hopefully you all enjoy this as well. See you next week. And again, thank you very much for watching tonight. And I'm just trying to get the outro ready. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.